Hi class. Um, I've prepared this chapter 1 video for you. My name is Dr. Jackie Houghton. This is a picture of me in Hawaii at one of the most happy moments of my life. I had been surfing and scuba diving and parasailing for weeks, and I'm getting on the plane to come home. Well, you know, Hawaii's pretty fabulous if you've never been. I highly suggest it. I want to welcome you to this class. It's a very demanding topic, and it will require many hours of diligent study to master. I want to make this very, very exciting for you and as fun as possible. So please feel free to give me feedback. Email me. I'll set up something where you can give some anonymous feedback. I want this to be flowing. I want it to be interesting. I want it to be informative. I want it to be relevant. I want you to be happy with this class. So in chapter 1, what we're going to learn are sweeping concepts. Well, not in chapter 1, but in the entire course. These are sweeping concepts that people, study for years. And you're going to be covering, many of these in a very short time. And these are core concepts like physics, biology, chemistry, anatomy and physiology, and ecosystems. Just so you know, in medical school, my anatomy class was 4 hours a day, 5 days a week for a year. Just anatomy. I've taken 4 years of chemistry classes, 2 years of physics classes, about 4 or 5 or 6 years of biology classes. So, to try to condense that information into something that has some meaning to you is a difficult task. So, bear with me, and if you have trouble, just ask me, because I'm not asking you, the minute questions. I'm asking you broad questions. So the first thing that we're going to start with, and I will make some, if I can, some notes with this, maybe highlighter, or I'm trying with these. Okay, so we're going to define, the difference between something that's living and something that's non-living. So right now, I'd like you to think, what do you think is something that is not living? Well, how about, since I can't get direct feedback from you, how about the sun? Is that living? Well, some people would say it's living in a certain way because it does consume energy, but it doesn't have the other characteristics that we're looking for. So the sun is non-living, and the planet Earth, before life was developed here, was non-living. So water is non-living, although it is essential for living beings. It itself is a non-living thing. Rocks, dirt, that's about it. So let's go by the criteria we have here. Living things have a little bit different makeup, different molecular structure. Now, it doesn't mean they don't have the same atoms in them, and I'll cover atoms for you in case you're unfamiliar. Then non-living things. Let me just say right away, because we don't really cover this till next chapter, an atom, A-T-O-M, is the smallest unit of matter. Now, with that said, This is a coherent unit, and it does have particles within it, but those aren't a coherent unit. So this is the smallest unit of matter. This is just a standard definition, and it's good enough for this class. Okay? We will study what's inside of an atom. Just 3 principal particles. There are many more, but again, we're trying to give you as much information without getting too technical. So an atom is the smallest unit of matter. Atoms come in different forms. So there are different atoms, and I'm sure that you're familiar. They're different from each other. We have about 100, somewhere around 100 different atoms. Some are actually created by man. Some of them are naturally occurring. We have 90-something naturally occurring atoms. Yes, atoms. Each atom that is of a different type, like this is carbon right here. This is hydrogen. I'm sure you've heard of hydrogen. Oxygen, you've heard of oxygen. Nitrogen. These are separate atoms. Okay? They all have very similar structure inside. It's just a different number of particles that it has inside of it. So some of these are very light, like hydrogen is the lightest. And then we go to very, very heavy, like plutonium. So, and then when we discuss that, it'll make more sense. So anyway, living things have, in particular, a lot of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. And that's because these particular elements, so an atom that is a particular atom is called an element. So this is the element of carbon, this is the element of hydrogen, this is the element of oxygen, and they are each atoms as well. So atom is like the big branch, and these are the trunk of a tree, and these are the branches of the tree. I hope that's clear. So these are highly reactive atoms as opposed to the atoms comprising rocks. However, our bodies do contain very tiny amounts of those substances as well. I'm sure you're familiar that we have iron in our blood, and we have many, many, many metals in our body which help physiological processes. So living things also require energy and raw materials. Let me ask you a question. How long can you go without eating food? Well, that'll differ between different people, but I would say if you don't eat for 60 days, your body's going to break down to a point where you probably die. So my next question is, how many days can you go without drinking water? Well, that's going to be less, right? So do you get my point here? We have to eat food, and a rock does not have to eat food. Okay, see the difference? Okay, so living things are either one cell or many cells, but at least they're cells. And a cell, I think everyone knows what a cell is, and if you don't, you will know by the time this class is over. And a cell is basically a unit, the smallest unit of living matter. Okay? And a cell, right, usually has a nucleus here, it has a cell membrane here, and a cell membrane is 2 layers. That's why I did that. And then it has different little organelles inside of it, which have different jobs to do, which allow this cell to maintain its structure and carry out metabolic processes which make it remain alive. Okay? So the next one is maintain homeostasis. Let me ask you a question. See, if we approach this topic by questions, then I think it could make a little more sense to you. I'm not sure. If you go home today in your house or apartment and the temperature outside is 105, are you comfortable with that temperature? If you go in your house and you've left it closed all day long and you go inside and the temperature is 92, are you comfortable there? And how long would you be able to live in that environment at 92 degrees? If you think about that, then you come to understand that that's why we have air conditioners and fans, and we throw our clothes off, or we jump in a pool. Why do we do those things? It's because we're uncomfortable and we want to change our internal temperature because our cells are screaming, "We're too hot, please cool us down." Does that make sense to you? So you'll be learning a lot about homeostasis. Cells have a lot of different requirements. So these cells, where am I? Oh, these cells up here have requirements. Like they need food, they need water, they need a particular temperature, they need a particular environment in which to live. Why do you put milk in the refrigerator after you open it up and pour it on your cereal? Because there are living things inside the milk that cannot survive in the temperature inside of your refrigerator. However, if you leave the milk out, what happens? Well, those living things start growing and the milk will become sour. That's living organisms that are now multiplying because they have the temperature requirement that they need. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're going to be learning a great deal about homeostasis. It's basically the process that an organism goes through, or even a single cell, of maintaining an environment that the cell can live in, such as a temperature range. So if you have a fever of 105, fun fact, your enzymes will begin to come apart. Not really a good thing. So the next one is living things respond to their environment. Okay, respond to their external environment. So part of homeostasis is reacting to the changing environment. Living things have sensors, which are sensory receptors in your skin, which monitor these changes and report those changes to the brain. The brain will then mull that information around and it will send out a signal to make some kind of change to maintain its homeostasis. For instance, your skin will pick up the temperature of the room around you or the air around you, and if there's a change that might put your body in jeopardy, that information goes to your brain, and your brain will decide we need to either cool you down or warm you up. So the cell's air conditioning system, and you'll learn this later, is the skin. And the body's heater is your muscles. You'll learn about this later. So we have an air conditioning and heating system, and the thermostat in your house has a thermometer, and the thermometer would be analogous to your skin. And the changes go inside, and there's a little computer inside your thermostat, which is its brain. That's right. So the sensors, the sensory receptors in your skin will go to your brain. Your brain will say, I think it's too hot. I'm going to engage the skin in sweating. And that sweating will cool the surface of my skin. It'll cool the little blood vessels underneath the skin. And that cooling will go to my core and take my body temperature down. It's fabulous. Miraculous. Okay. Living things grow and they reproduce. Do rocks grow? Usually they get smaller, right? They erode. And you could break a rock apart and say that it's reproducing, but I wouldn't define it that way. So we grow, take a human being, when they're born, they're little, they're 7, 8 pounds, and they grow up. And then when they're grown up, they can reproduce and make more. It's just one of these definition things. And then populations of living things evolve. So, since I'm very active in, reading scientific reports and such, I've found evidence, or scientists have found evidence, that evolution can occur far more quickly than we ever believed before. And it's well known that viruses can evolve within hours. This is a good thing and this is a bad thing. If we can control it and use it for our own purposes, like delivering DNA to someone who has damaged DNA, that would be a wonderful thing. However, if if viruses grow resistant to our antibiotics, that's not a good thing. Well, actually, antibiotics don't work on viruses. So we really don't want viruses to mutate on us. That's evolving, is mutating. Because then they can kill us. But one thing you need to know about all living things is that they all want to survive. And they don't care who they take down to get that accomplished. So a virus will fight for its life and it will kill you indiscriminately because it wants to survive. And human beings want to survive and they will kill viruses indiscriminately because we want to survive. And I'll tell you right now, in a battle between viruses and human beings, viruses would win if there was an out-and-out war, because we can't evolve as quickly as a virus can. And then they'll just evolve away from anything we do to try to kill them. Case in point, viruses are far older historically than human beings. They're billions and billions, hundreds of billions of years older than a human being. And they know how to evolve very, very, very quickly. They're actually not a living thing. All they are is a package of DNA or RNA, and they're not actually living. However, it does have a drive to survive, and viruses can live in any conditions. They've even been found on meteors. So they can withstand very high temperatures, very low temperatures, very high pressures, very low pressures, and we have found them on meteors, so that means that they exist off planet. But again, they're not living things. They don't require energy. They're not composed of cells. They are not a cell. They don't maintain homeostasis, but they look for a great breeding place. So a human body is a great petri dish, if you know what a petri dish is. It's a great place for single-celled organisms and viruses to live. So that's why we need a defense system. Okay, moving on. This is called taxonomy. We want you to know where human beings fit amongst all living things, all plants and animals. We want you to know, where do human beings fit. So, fitting into a system, you have to know what the system is first. This concept is huge, and people study this for years and years. So I'm going to ask you to learn a little more quickly. I'm going to outline this, give you the cliff notes of it, and see if we can figure it out. So the backstory is, scientists began looking at living things thousands of years ago, maybe tens of thousands. I don't really know. But they began to notice the differences and similarities between living things. And of course they didn't have microscopes back then, so all they could see were the things that you can see with your eyes. So some of these scientists wondered if there were relationships between these living things. For instance, they would see different types of monkeys and wonder, well, that looks a little bit like we do. It's got, two arms, two legs. They can walk on their legs. They have hands with thumbs, so forth and so on. So they're very curious about it. So as they began organizing all these living things and trying to find similarities among these things, they would communicate with each other and create a classification system. And now we have a very highly sophisticated classification system where we take living things that have a lot of similarities and we put them in groups and we find out where they evolved from. Well, that's a little more information than you need, but here's how it goes. And it's a tree. It's a branching tree. So let me go down here. So it's like a tree. So if we take the trunk and call that living things, then we're going to make 3 branches. It's a way to classify things in a visual way, but also in a very meaningful way, so that we can study all these different organisms. So the first branches off this trunk of living things, the first branches are called domains. And the domains are bacteria, archaea, and eukaryotes. This is us. So bacteria are very, very small. Their cells are very primitive. They have no nucleus. Their DNA is just in open strands inside their cytoplasm. Archaea are also very, very small single-celled organisms. And then the eukaryotes, these have nuclei. You'll find out what that is. Okay, these have a nucleus. Plural is nuclei. So we're going to follow the eukaryotes. Let's say that this is the eukaryotes. This will further branch, right, into kingdoms, into 4 kingdoms. Okay. These 4 kingdoms are protists, animalia, fungi, and plantae. So the animalia, animals and plants you're very familiar with. Fungus, that's what makes cheese really smell bad but taste really good. And protists are single-celled organisms. So no, and then these are going to branch again, right? And then we're going to get smaller and smaller and smaller branches. But if you follow these branches back, it goes back to here. We'll say that this is the branch of the tree is where life was created. So you and me and everyone you know, our great going back billions of years ancestor was a single-celled organism right here. Okay, a single-celled organism. That organism changed and evolved and changed into one of these 3 things, a bacteria, archaea, or a eukaryote. And then that would evolve and create these different things, and that would evolve and create these different things, and that would evolve. So that's evolution. This is a great picture. The earliest, so this is the trunk of the tree here. These are the earliest organisms, and this is pre-life down here. This is, and then we'll talk about the origins of life. Only theories at this point. No one knows. No one was there, and no one has spoken to us and told us that how it was. So we can only guess. And a theory is just a guess. Origins of life. Okay, once the planet was non-living, and now it has living things. So somehow life came to planet Earth. And as it evolved, as we classify it, they belong to this classification, which is bacteria, which is very, very primitive, the earliest organisms. And then the eukaryotes, as you see, started here. These started just about the same time. One set of cells, as they encountered different environments, they would evolve, like homeostasis, and their DNA would actually change. And then this side went this way, and then this branch, so this is older down here, this is older than this is. And this is younger than this. Everything down here is the oldest, hundreds of billions of years. And then as we go up, it's younger and younger and younger and younger and younger and younger. So here are the eukaryotes. This is the ones we're going to be interested in because these are humans. So plants, as you see, developed first. Second were protists, like algae. Then fungus, and then last animals. So the criteria they use for classification, and again, these are just people who studied this stuff, and they came up with, they just made it up. It didn't come from some extraterrestrial source or anything. Human beings made all this up. So they said, well, we're going to use a criteria of the presence or the absence of a nucleus. And a nucleus is an organelle inside of a cell that contains DNA. So the domain of bacteria and archaea do not have a membrane-bound nucleus. That'll have more meaning when we study cells. Okay? So the eukaryotes, that's us, that's plants and animals, do have a membrane-bound nucleus, a distinct nucleus where the DNA is segregated from the rest of the organelles inside of a cell. Okay, so the next criteria is how many cells an organism possesses. An organism can be one cell, right? Or it can be many cells. Uni means one. You write that. Uni means one. Multi means many. More than one. Okay? So, where are we? So, is it unicellular or is it multicellular? These are just criteria that we're using. And what type of metabolism do they have? Okay? So, in our domain of eukaryotes, these are cells that have membrane-bound organelles and are usually multicellular, except for the protists. We still have this. So, the protists are unicellular, so they have one cell only. They're simple. They can be multicellular, but it's a limited number, under hundreds, whereas human beings have between 70 and 100 trillion cells, right? So these are protozoa, algae, slime molds. It's if you have a pond or a bird bath or something, or you leave a glass of water out, in 3 or 4 days, you touch it and there's slime inside. That's these things. You can grow these unicellular organisms anywhere. Okay, plants, as we know, multicellular, eukaryotic, and photosynthetic. That means that they produce their energy from sunlight. Animals, as we know, multicellular. There are unicellular animals. Plankton. Eukaryotic and heterotrophic. We'll discuss that later. Too much right now. Fungus is molds, yeast. So you can't even make bread without these fungi. Mushrooms, most people eat mushrooms. Molds come in cheeses. These are eukaryotic, and these are decomposers. You can find them in your backyard, working on the soil. Okay, so how do human beings fit into this system? So if we take the domain Animalia up here, domain Animalia, and we follow the branches farther and farther and farther, we eventually find ourselves. Now scientists have agreed upon these branches and naming them, and you're going to have to remember this for the exam, domains. Remember the 3 domains. The kingdoms are a subset of each domain. The phyla, or phylum, is a subdomain of a kingdom. A class is a subdomain of a phylum. Order, again, subdomain of a class. Family, genus, and species. You're probably familiar with genus and species. Human beings, I'm sorry. Okay, human beings, right? Their genus is Homo. And the species is sapien. And that distinguishes our name from any monkey's names, because there are different genus and species. Okay, so here we go. A human being, we're in the domain of eukaryotes. We're in the kingdom Animalia. We're in the phylum Chordata. And this is everything that has a spinal cord. So fish, what do I want to say? Dogs, cats, anything that has a spinal cord. Chordata means a spinal cord. Class Mammalia, that means that we suckle our young. Order Primates. Family Hominidae. Genus and species Homo sapien. So you're going to have to know this for the exam and the quizzes. So each branch on this tree has organisms that are similar to other organisms on that same branch to a greater or lesser extent. And the smallest unit, as you saw back on this page, this has the smallest number of individuals than up here. If we take all of the living things that are in this domain, it's billions, even of different genus and species. This is billions, okay? This is millions. This is hundreds of thousands. This is tens of thousands, etc., etc. And we get smaller and smaller. There are only 6 billion human beings, or 3.5 billion, I forget how many there are. But how many primates are there? Because it includes our 3 billion people plus all of the primates on the planet. And I'm sure there are, billions of those. Get what I'm saying? But if we take the whole number of eukaryotes on the planet, including all the single-celled organisms, it's probably upwards of trillions living beings. And I consider every cell in my body a living being because it has a life of its own. Okay, so the smallest unit of classification and the most specific is a species. Usually organisms of different species cannot breed together. There are a few exceptions. But if you look at dogs, for instance, they all belong to the same genus, but a little different species. No, they all belong to the same genus and species, but they have different breeds. A breed is an even smaller subcategory of species, but they can all interbreed. They have similar physical and functional characteristics, and they can interbreed and produce fertile offspring. That's if you're in the same species. So that means that all dogs are in the same species, and all cats, house cats. The second smallest unit is the genus, and this means that our genetic DNA material is identical, not like twins, but in number and type of chromosomes amongst all members of that species. So all living beings belong to the same human beings belong to the same genus and species, Homo sapien. So defining features of human beings. Sorry. We have two legs. Bi means, you need to know some of this medical terminology. So I'll just point it out to you. Bi means two. Pedal means foot. And ism means that it's an adjective, it's descriptive. So we have 2 feet. So we can stand upright and walk on 2 legs or 2 feet. We have opposable thumbs. That means our thumbs can touch our fingers. So we can manipulate objects in the external environment. That's how we can make computers. We have a large brain relative to our body size. And that's because we have this huge prefrontal cortex, which is simply there for manipulating data. In lower animals, like a squid, well, actually a squid is very, very intelligent. But take a chicken. Chicken's not very smart. They're known for that. They don't have a prefrontal cortex. They don't do a lot of thinking. They're not very, cerebral. So most of the function of their brain is just to maintain homeostasis. And capacity for language. Dolphins have a little language, but they can't write. So we have written and spoken word. You notice the difference between a human hand and a primate hand, a lower primate hand, or chimp. It's a long distance between the tips of the fingers and the thumb. So it's not as easy for them to grasp. You see, this is opposable right here. They can primitively hold things, but they can't manipulate to the extent that we can. And that's one of those differences that scientists used in the beginning to distinguish chimps from humans, even though we have very, very similar characteristics. Okay, moving on to the next topic. This is a whole different topic. We're going to talk about matter, and this is like matter in the universe. All matter, we assume that all matter in the universe has the same level of organization. So there are particles that are smaller than atoms, okay? Because atoms contain 3 particles that we'll be interested in: electrons, protons, and neutrons. But they also have quarks and muons and anti-muons and anti-quarks and so many particles. They're thinking there are hundreds of particles that have yet to be named even. But we'll be concerned with 3. So if we're talking about matter in the universe, we're talking about atoms, because atoms is the smallest unit of matter, organized matter. Okay? Now, atoms can bond with each other. Atoms are like little magnets, and they have different degrees of intensity. Like you can have strong magnets and you can have weak magnets. A strong magnet will pull stronger than a weak magnet will. But some atoms have no magnetism at all. So we call those inert, and they just stay off by themselves. So atoms, so that's our smallest unit of matter. And then these can bond together, and they make the second layer or level of matter, which is called a molecule. Now, for example, hydrogen, H stands for hydrogen. You probably know that. Right? That's an atom. But it can bond with oxygen, right? And it can make something you're very familiar with, water. Now, hydrogen comes how? Hydrogen is a gas, yes? Oh my goodness, yes. Oxygen comes how? Oh, it's a gas, yes? However, when you combine them, they make something that's water. Liquid. Very strange, yes? So we're not going to go into why that's so because it's too much information for this class. But molecules have different properties than the atoms that compose them. Atoms, which are different elements, have certain properties. They're either a gas, and we're talking about at room temperature, a gas, or they're a liquid, or they're a solid. That's one of the criteria. Then they have these different levels of magnetic force. But a molecule that contains atoms or elements have different properties than the atoms themselves. Obviously, water is a very good example here. Okay, so then we have molecules. And molecules can organize themselves under certain circumstances to form cells. Okay, and a cell is the smallest unit of living matter. Okay, then cells evolutionarily sort of organize themselves into tissues, and a tissue is similar cells. Oops, sorry. Similar cells together. Like, and what we'll study is skin, that's epithelial tissue, muscles, muscle tissue, nerves, nervous tissue, and connective tissues. Oops. Human beings are made of these 4 tissue types. And then tissues will then form organs, like your heart and your lungs. And organs have different tissue types. Whoops, I forgot the tissues in here. Then from organs to organ systems, like the cardiovascular system, the respiratory system, etc. Then we have an organism, like a human being, a dog, a cat, a spider, organism. Then we have a population. Then we have a community. And again, someone made this up, but we have to go with it. Then we have an ecosystem and then a biosphere. Now, every living thing lives in the biosphere. Here's Earth, and this is the biosphere. It's a very thin layer, and you get these great pictures if you go to the NASA website. The biosphere is a very thin layer of gases in which all living things exist. An ecosystem is a balanced system where a certain set of living things live. An ecosystem can be as small as your backyard or as large as a continent. But an ecosystem is usually like a rainforest. The water comes from the sky, the minerals come from the soil, the food comes from the fruit off of the trees, and the animals live on those fruits, and then small animals get eaten by larger animals, and it's kind of a balanced system. You maintain the number of different organisms, and it's very well balanced. Okay, so this is just a pictorial. Here's an atom, a depiction of an atom. Here's this is a water molecule here. These are little hydrogens, and this is an oxygen. Then we have the cell, the tissues, the organ system, organism, population, community, and finally an ecosystem and the biosphere. The biosphere is this layer This very thin layer right here in which every single living thing lives. Okay? Let's talk about science a little bit. Science is it's a study of knowledge. Human beings have a thirst for knowing everything. And by knowing everything, we can help to maintain our homeostasis as a species. If you understand, everything about your environment, then we can adapt to it. Don't you see? If a meteor was coming towards Earth and wanted to hit it, or was heading in our direction and was going to collide with us, homeostasis would, see, that would be a sensory input, and then all of our brain power would find a way to fight that off, to maybe change its direction or blow it up, so that it doesn't destroy us, because every living thing wants to remain alive. So science is just a study of everything. The natural world, that's everything, right? So it's knowledge, right, that we've gathered, and we can gather knowledge by observations, by testing, many different ways to obtain knowledge. And then the process used to acquire this knowledge we call the scientific method. This is our first in-depth study for you in this class, is the scientific method. And these are steps that scientists use, and it's very intuitive. You use it every single day. The steps are to observe any kind of phenomenon or anything. You're a doctor and you see a patient in a ward with a disease, and 20 other people have the same disease, and 19 people die and one person lives. Well, that's an observation, and you ask yourself then a question. This is a question. A hypothesis is a question. Why did that person live? Good question, right? Then you make a prediction that you can test. You will say, well, I believe, just from back knowledge, from studying in books, from other people, I believe that my patient who lived has natural antibodies against that disease X. So I'm going to test that hypothesis or that guess. Okay, that's a guess, an educated guess. Okay? Question leads to an educated guess. Then we're going to make a prediction. I'm going to predict that this person has antibodies against disease X. Then I'm going to conduct an experiment. So I'm going to draw blood, right? And I'm going to put it in a petri dish. This is a petri dish. Put the blood in the petri dish. Then I'm going to put disease X in here and see if this person gets the disease or not, or something like that. And then you test it and see if it works. So he can develop an antibody from this person who survived, and then inject it into a person who has the disease, who hasn't died yet, and see if it protects them against the disease. And in fact, this is how many of our antibiotics have been developed. Another observation you could make is that you want to cook cupcakes. Okay? So you mix up the batter according to the directions, you mix it all up, you put it in the little tin, you put it in the oven, and it comes out and it looks like this. And you go, oh, I made an observation. That muffin or cupcake did not rise. So I'm going to make a question. Why did that not rise? And then I'm going to make a guess. Well, I did something wrong in mixing up the batter. So then I'm going to make a testable prediction. I'm going to say, if I try a different recipe, or if I go slowly and make sure that I have all the correct ingredients, that I will make a cupcake that will rise. So my experiment is to make the batter again and then observe my results. So this time I'm more careful, and my result was this, a cupcake that rose. See what I'm saying? So we use this all the time. Many times you do something, you turn on a light, but it doesn't go on. That's an observation. So you formulate a hypothesis, a guess. You guess that the light bulb, right, blew out. So you get a new light bulb. That's a testable prediction. You experiment. You put the new light bulb in, and it works or it doesn't work. If it works, then you finished. If it doesn't work, then you have to modify your hypothesis. Wow, it still doesn't go on. I wonder maybe if the lamp is plugged in. So that's my next experiment, right? I'm going to see if it's plugged in. So either that works or it doesn't work. If that doesn't work, then I have to go back to the breaker. Is the breaker good? The fuse in the house, etc., etc. So you get how that works. So this looks very, very complicated and convoluted, but if you follow it, it's not so bad. So you make an observation. So inductive reasoning means you formulate a hypothesis. So that's a question and a guess. The question actually comes from the observation, and a hypothesis is the guess. So you go out to your car, it doesn't start, you make a guess, right? Oh, my battery's dead. If you check the battery and it's okay, then you say, well, maybe I'm out of gas. So those are your guesses, right? So then so step 3, so you have a guess, right? Then you use deductive reasoning to make a testable prediction. So my inductive reasoning is formulating what could be wrong. My car won't start. I formulate a hypothesis, my battery is dead. Then deductive reasoning, this is where we get smaller. I'm going to jumpstart my car and see if it starts. Okay, that's my testable prediction. I'm predicting, and I can test it, that if I get a jump start, my car will start. Then we do the experiment. I get jumper cables and I try to start the car. So it either works or it doesn't work. Again, this is inductive reasoning. It either works or it doesn't work. So we either have to predict or it's finished. Okay? And you do that over and over and over and over until you get the result that you want. I hope that makes some kind of sense. I have put up some links to videos that you can go look at that have more specific information about these topics. Okay, and as always, you can email me and put a question up on the discussion board. So the inductive reasoning is making a generalization based on observations about the world. My car won't start, the battery's dead. Every winter in the past was colder than the preceding summer, sorry. And the generalization is winter will always be colder than summer. And that's a good one. Then we make a hypothesis. This is a tentative statement about the natural world. This is a guess. The hypothesis should be tested under many different conditions. The more conditions you use, the more sound is your hypothesis. The better your hypothesis is, the stronger it is. Then we're going to make these testable predictions that are based on your question, and they should use deductive reasoning and are often in the form of, if I do this, then this will happen. If I jump start my car, it will start. And it should be specific so that you can test it and that other people can test it. Okay. So the truth or the falsehood of a prediction is tested by observation and experimentation. So the experiment is a very carefully planned and executed manipulation of the natural world. So it can be as simple as starting your car, or it can be as complex as manipulating DNA. Okay, it can be very, very sophisticated or very simple. In a controlled experiment, you have different variables, but you only want to change one variable at a time to figure out what's going on. A great example is our cupcake. Sorry. Okay, cupcake. We need flour, oil, sugar, water, or milk, whatever. These are general. What do you call it? Baking powder and salt. Now, if you make a cupcake and it doesn't rise, it's either the flour, the oil, the sugar, the water, the salt, or the baking powder. Okay? So these are all if you're going to make an experiment and change your batter to try to make a good cupcake, a controlled experiment would be to change only one of these. These are all variables. I can vary the amount of flour I use. I can vary the amount of oil, etc., etc. So you need to choose which of these variables you're going to use to change. And then you know that that's the thing that changed it. But if you change all the amounts of all of these, you won't know which one thing made the difference. Does that make sense? I think so. So here's a nice example. We're selecting a large population. So if you want to test something like how people will react to a television show. Say you're doing an experiment where you want to see if your new television show will be popular with the masses. So the way you would do a scientific study is you would select a large number of appropriate subjects, and the subjects are people who would want to watch your show. You divide them into two groups randomly, and random is powerful. Treat the two groups equally in all ways but one. That's your variable, right? So in science, they do this often. In medicine, they do this all the time. We're going to change our analogy here to medicine. We're going to try a new antidepressant. So you have your large population here. You put them into two groups, and you're going to give one group the new medicine, and the other group will get a placebo. A placebo is a sugar pill, right? It should have no effect on the subject. And the subject will not know what you're doing, and the person who gives the medicine doesn't know if they're giving the placebo or they're giving the medicine, right? So the medicine has to look identical to the placebo, and they have, formularies who do that. Okay, they're using blood pressure here, but if we use medicine, it's the same difference. So then you give the medicine to one group, you give the placebo to the other group, and you see how they react. So if you're looking for results from the medicine, you should observe those in this controlled experimental group. The control group That's just if you don't do anything, that's how they should act. So then you compare how they are between each other. If these people um, were nervous to begin with, and these people were nervous, but they got medicine, and over time they calmed down, and this group did not, then your medicine is probably effective. And if it doesn't work, then you modify your medication. This is how they generally bring new medicines to market. So now we want to look at and evaluate and retest our hypothesis. So if the prediction is false, if our medicine doesn't work, then we have to modify our medicine and retest it, etc., etc. So this is the scientific method now. You can go to Mastering Biology, and in the study area you can see this animation. But it won't show, I don't think it'll show, maybe it will. Oh, it does. Okay, I'm not going to play this whole thing. You can go to the study area and watch that yourself. Let's see if we can move on from this. I'm not sure. Okay. So now what we want to do, once we have a finding, then we want to tell the world about this, because we're building upon everybody's observations and experimentations so that the world can get more knowledge. So the way, if we find a medicine that works against malaria, we want to tell everybody about it. So the way that science does that, it's very organized. They put their findings in a peer-reviewed journal. These are specific journals for specific scientists, and there, other scientists who study the same things that they do can read it. They can also do their own experiments, and they will comment on that. And then the experts, those are people who do exactly what you do, must approve these articles before they're published. A peer-reviewed article is considered pretty much, honest and factual. The results are assumed to be valid only for conditions under which the experiment was done. So let's say that, and this is very common, you gave a supplement like vitamin A to lab rats, and you found that their visual acuity increased by 200%. So then you go and you you go to a vitamin producing plant, and you make vitamin A, and you go on QVC and you say, you take 5,000 milligrams of vitamin A and your visual acuity will double. Well, it's not valid because that test was not done on human beings. So it's only valid for the conditions under the experiment was done, meaning it was only good for rats, not for humans. Okay, so we can use popular press to disseminate this information. You have to be careful because it's not a peer-reviewed approval. And then, of course, electronic publications, the web. The internet is not regulated, all right? So I can do an experiment, I can put my results on the internet, but it's not necessarily true because it hasn't been approved by other experts. You have to be very careful about where you get your information. People call me all the time and say, should I take valerian root for such and such a disorder? Because I saw on a website where they said it would do this and this and this. And I will say, well, which website and who said it and is it peer reviewed? And they'll go, I don't know, what's that? So your sources when you quote things are very, very important. You need to know if it's real information or if it's pop information. So we're going to talk about a theory now. Whew. For a guess to become a theory, it must be broad. Okay? It can't be a tiny little thing. It has to be extensively tested. Like penicillin. Penicillin has been so widely tested and supported over time that doctors are very confident when they give that it can cure a certain spectrum of diseases. It can explain a broad range of facts, like penicillin can explain a lot of things. And a high degree of reliability. Very highly reliable is penicillin. Advil. Broad, extensively tested, supported over time, explain a broad range of facts, and a high degree of reliability. If you have a headache and you take Advil, there is a high probability that your headache will go away. And theories can be refuted in the future. There are many theories that, over time did not pan out. So, we're going to talk about critical thinking next. Critical thinking is what we want to teach you so that you're an intelligent observer of life. And critical thinking is thinking about knowledge, thinking about information in a particular way so that it's intelligent. So you want to be skeptical. If someone comes to you and says, hey, I heard that if you eat dirt, the minerals that you get will make you really strong and healthy. Well, be skeptical of something like that. And being skeptical doesn't mean that you automatically say that's baloney. It means that you want to look up the facts yourself. So you want to be able to appreciate the value of statistics, like how many people ate dirt and got stronger and healthier. Is there any statistical data to back up that eating dirt will make you strong and healthy? No. So statistics can be shown in graphs. So if you learn to read a graph, that's very helpful. And again, you can find that in the study area on Mastering Biology. So you need to be able to distinguish antidotes. So one person who ate dirt and got stronger and healthier, that's anecdotal information. Okay? That is not scientific. There was no study done. Until someone does a study on eating dirt and finding out the effects, it's only an anecdote. So you need to separate facts from conclusions. And you need to understand the differences between correlation and causation. Why do you need to know science? Well, you need to know science because without science you wouldn't know how to use your iPhone. Ta-da! Right? Oh no! So you had to learn some science just to use your computer, right? That's science. Yes. You need to learn science so that when you open the sour cream and you see green fuzzy stuff on it, you know to throw that away. That's science. So science is all around. You use it every day. You interact with it every day. Science is just knowledge. It's organized knowledge. It helps us to make informed decisions in life. It's very, very important, and I hope you enjoyed that.